Hey everybody, so I'm listening back to this and I realize I sound really freaking tired, so sorry if I sound like I'm "Grr." It's just when I was recording this it was like 3 a.m., so sorry about that. Anyway, on to the show. Hey everybody. So, welcome back to our look at the stories of H.P. Lovecraft. I'll have a link in the description to the first video I did, but this is the second in our look through the stories of H.P. Lovecraft. Basically, I'm just going to go down the list in the order in the book that I have. So we're looking at The Alchemist. This is early work, so it's when he's still going through his whole I must be like Edgar Allan Poe phase. So The Alchemist was written in 1908. It wouldn't be published until November of 1916, however, in the United Amateur. So it was a long time afterwards. In 1908, I believe it was either just before or after he dropped out of high school. Lovecraft dropped out of high school. I think it was like his sophomore or junior year. I don't know if they had the same kind of years we have now, but which is weird because he wasn't a bad student in subjects that he knew a lot about. He's a weird dude. He never got any kind of formal education after that. Anyway, so The Alchemist. The story is told from the perspective of a man looking back on an event. This is not uncommon. In fact, most of his stories are told from the perspective of somebody looking back on an event or as an event is coming to a close. In this story, it's our protagonist, Anthony, as they put it, the accursed Comites de C. He never actually gives him a name. He just has a letter C for some reason. I don't know why. He just never gave it a name. So they're the C's. Forgive me for my French, but you just have to bear with me the way I pronounce these things. He's talking about his castle, which was of an ancient noble line in France. Unfortunately, due to a curse in his family line, it's fallen into disgrace. This is one of the themes of Lovecraft's stories. His protagonists are often individuals from noble family lines that have fallen in disrepair, either through a curse or just through their own negligence. You can kind of see this in different stories, like the case of Charles Dexter Ward, the Dunwich Horror, Thing on the Doorstep, Whisper in Darkness. Rats in the Walls is another one that kind of does it. But yeah, so it's kind of a theme of his. The dude was kind of an elitist snob, a weird sort of way, which is very strange. He's talking about how his castle has been falling apart for generations. Anthony is the last of his line. He's looking back on the story. He's about 90 years old at this point, but he's looking back on this curse that he ended up breaking. He has no kids, by the way, so when he dies, his family line is gone, which he strangely seems to be okay with. Goes back in time and starts talking about how he grew up. He was raised without his parents. His father was killed when he was 32 when an old stone from the castle wall, because like I said, the castle's been falling apart for generations. He lives in one tower. The rest of it's almost completely unusable and dangerous. Part of the castle fell on his dad and killed him, and his mother died during childbirth. So he was raised by a servant, the only servant his family has, because the people of the village nearby avoid his family because they're cursed. But Pierre raised him completely away from the other children in the local village, partly because he's of noble blood and he's above this servant class, but also because he was afraid that his ward would learn about the curse upon his family that peasants like to talk about. This is another thing Lovecraft does. He often is very, very guilty of writing himself into his stories, shamelessly in a lot of ways. He often had characters that were like weird loners, that had like no friends or few friends. This is him kind of inserting himself, because Lovecraft was a weird dude. Although he was kind of close with his fan base, he didn't have a lot of close friends, and his social life was less than ideal. Slowly as he grows up, Anthony has kind of pieced together from all these books and stuff that he's been reading, and from what little he's able to get out of Pierre, because Pierre's getting old. He was kind of an old guy when he started taking care of him, so he's getting up there in age. No men of his family line live past 32. But eventually he hits 21, and Pierre gives him a letter that has been passed down the family line from father to son. It tells the story about how family was cursed due to a fellow by the name of Charles le Sorcerer. So Charles le Sorcerer is an evil alchemist who was the son of, they call him Malvius the Evil. Yeah, the names weren't great. In the 13th century, these guys were famous for being like evil guys, made a pact with the devil. There was stories about Malvius sacrificing his wife to gain dark magic. They were known as alchemists and black magic users. Anytime children in the village went missing, it was assumed these guys took them and killed them. Current leader of this noble household, son goes missing, and he freaks the fuck out. This guy assumes that Malvius and his evil son took him and are, going to sacrifice him to Satan or something, right? He goes over to this dude's house, kicks in the door, and kills this old man. After that, almost immediately, in the most convoluted and goofy, melodramatic way possible, his servants immediately show up after he does this, going, "Oh, we found your son. He was okay. He was just kind of lost, and he's not hurt, and he was fine." And of course, right after this, as they're leaving, Charles the Sorcerer walks up to the commandant, says to him, "None of your descendants are going to live to be older than you are." And he throws some evil liquid in his face. It kills the commandant, and then he runs into the woods dramatically, never to be seen again, right? After this, everyone kind of forgets about it, and it's like kind of a weird thing that happens. But his son, the kid that kind of accidentally started all this, gets to be about 32 years old. On a hunt, he gets hit with an arrow and dies. It's like the next in line, the son of the guy that just died of an arrow attack was actually found dead in a field for no reason at 32. And then the next guy drowns in a moat. So, on and on and on. Nobody lives past 32. So one thing I do want to get into is alchemy. We've mentioned that they were known as alchemists, and he uses an evil potion to kill the first commandant. Alchemy is a big thing in Lovecraft stories. He uses it a lot. It's really weird. Like, he's known for sci-fi, but he has a lot of alchemy and magic in his stories, and they kind of mix together. Really, the sci-fi stuff doesn't really start showing up until his later stories. Some of his stories later on, we kind of get back to some of the magical stuff, but you can definitely see a difference in where his stories change. And it's not one story, it's kind of a gradual thing where he kind of shifts from that. Anyway, so Antony finds out about that, and he freaks out, right? He's 21 years old, he only has 11 years left to live. So he starts studying black magic and alchemy to try to find a way to end this curse. And the thing is in his studies, he didn't find anything that could point to how this curse would even work. For a while there, he even starts to convince himself it's just a natural thing that happens. There's no magical aspect to it. He decides, as he gets closer and closer to his doom, that he's never going to marry and he's never going to have any kids because he doesn't want to continue the curse. At 30 years old, his servant Pierre dies, and in his loneliness, he starts exploring parts of the castle he wouldn't have normally because it's falling apart. There's a lot of stories about, evil curses and stuff at this castle, so he doesn't normally study or look into these parts of the castle, but, desperation. It isn't until he's about a week before he turns 32 that he finds one of the last towers that he hasn't explored. He goes down into the basement and he finds near a doorway that there's a secret door. So he opens the secret door and it leads into this tunnel that keeps going deeper and deeper under the castle, and it leads to a secret room. This is kind of where the story drops the ball a little bit and gets really, really goofy. Because, before that point, it's kind of interesting, right? You're like, oh, there's this curse, what's going on? Well, it turns out that as the door opens up, there's just a guy standing there. Some dude with a big beard and long hair. He's wearing a skull cap and a long medieval tunic of dark color, as Lovecraft puts it. He has eyes that were twin caves of abysmal darkness, getting back to that flowery language that Lovecraft loved a lot, especially in his early work. Well, anyway, so the guy starts speaking to him in Latin, because, we got to play all the evil wizard stereotypes. Lovecraft would have loved Dungeons and Dragons. I'm telling you. Would have loved it. So he starts telling him about how he's doomed and how it was the sorcerer who been destroying his family line and how he's next. He talks about how, the sorcerer and his father had found the elixir of eternal life. After going on in his evil speech, he pulls out some liquid that he's going to use. Antony, at this point, has a torch with him that he's been using to explore, and he just fucking throws it at this dude and sets his ass on fire. Guy drops the elixir or whatever. The guy starts burning and falls down. At this point, Antony looks around. He finds like an alchemy lab in the back. He finds a doorway that kind of leads out to the forest, which kind of explains how this guy was kind of getting in and out of the castle. So, he's wondering, who is this man? Why does he care so much, right? Because Lovecraft protagonists can't put two and two together. This is like a constant thing in his stories. Very obvious things you would put together. They just can't do it. So he goes up to this evil guy and, the guy's like, "You're a fool. I am the sorcerer," And that's how the story ends. It's a weird story. Again, I kind of got to give him credit, though. He was pretty young when he wrote this story. Again, I'm not a good writer. I do a little bit of creative writing here and there. It's never good. I can never finish a story anyway. But this story is very melodramatic, to put it lightly. The dude is basically just copying Edgar Allan Poe. Just hardcore. And you're going to see that a lot with these other stories. So the next one will be The Tomb, though. Also, I think I'm going to throw in a recommendation. I don't normally do this for my little Cool Cat Quickies, but for this one I'm going to make an exception because I found out that Blue Oyster Cult has a song called The Alchemist, which is actually told from the perspective of the alchemist, which is kind of cool. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Like and comment if you really like these videos. Check out our other stuff. I have a Twitter page now. I don't have anybody following me or anything because I don't know how Twitter really works. I'm going to be figuring that out. Yeah, it's Cool Cat Jack. I'll probably do an announcement either today or tomorrow, and I'll have a link to it, and I'll add it to my other links on my YouTube channel, my BitChute channel, if you guys care. Honestly, I don't even know how much I'm going to be on it. I'm trying to, expand and get more attention. But anyways, hopefully you weren't hearing the frogs in the background. We've been having a lot of rain, so we've been having these like horny frogs in the background, which have been driving me nuts all night, croaking. That has nothing to do with anything, but I'm going to keep it in anyway. Anyway, have a good night, and thanks for listening.